Tonight, we drift quietly back into a time the world has almost forgotten, a time of plagues, punishments, and pottage, the plain, thick stew that kept most souls alive through long, uncertain winters. This is the Middle Ages, not the one shown in painted halls or glowing screens, but the slow and difficult reality that ordinary people once woke to, day after day. The castles and shining armor belonged to the songs. Life itself was smaller, colder, and far less forgiving. So, before you settle in, you might dim the lights, perhaps let the soft hum of a fan fill the quiet space around you. Let the modern world fade, and breathe slowly as we travel back together. Imagine you are just waking up in the year 1325. The good news is simple enough. You are alive. The less fortunate truth is that everything else around you are alive as well. The fleas, the lice, the small creatures that share your straw bed and your air. Your mattress is a sack of tired straw, flattened and damp, patched where mice have chewed their way through the seams. The scent is heavy, earth, hay, and the faint sourness of old sweat. The wool blanket over you is coarse and weighted with a season's worth of dust. Sheets, pillows, comfort, those are things no one you know has ever spoken of. Your only real warmth comes from your own body, and the few others lying close beside you. Outside, the church bell calls through the mist, slow and unhurried, its tone carrying over fields and thatched rooftops. It is your alarm, though it feels more like a summons than an invitation. The sound marks the rhythm of every life in your small village. When to wake, when to work, when to pray, you open your eyes to the dimness of a single-room hut. There are no windows to welcome the dawn, only the thin cracks between wooden planks where cold air slips in. The floor is uneven earth, darkened by years of spilled water and the tread of bare feet. The scent that fills the room is a familiar mixture. Damp wool, smoke from last night's fire, a hint of goat, and something else that might once have been bread or beer. You live here with your family, and perhaps an animal or two who share the warmth. The idea of privacy is not yet born. You shift slightly, and your body protests. At 22, you are considered neither young nor old, just another working soul already beginning to feel the ache of the years. Your back is stiff from labor, your hands rough from soil and cold water. You move slowly, careful not to disturb those still sleeping beside you. The floor is cold beneath your feet. In some places, it is wet from the rain that crept through the thatched roof during the night. In others, it is dry but crusted, marked by the signs of the animals that wandered too close. You accept it without surprise. There are no rugs, no boards, only earth and straw. Morning begins not with coffee or conversation, but with quiet endurance. You stand, stretch, and prepare to face the small routines that shape every day. The first of these, as ever, is the simple but unavoidable call of nature. There are no private rooms for that, no running water, no porcelain, no doors that close. Outside the hut, there might be a small wooden bucket, already used and unpleasant, or perhaps only an open patch of ground behind the fence. The cold air meets your skin as you step outside, and you hear distant movement. Neighbors, too, beginning their day in the same unspoken ritual. For a moment, you look down the narrow street of your village, a winding lane of dirt and refuse, where every household empties its waste. The ground is uneven and soft beneath your feet, a mixture of rainwater, straw, and what people have thrown out through the night. There is a word some use before tossing the contents of a chamber pot from a window. Garde lay, watch out for the water. It drifts down into the muck, a daily offering to the street below. You breathe through your mouth and continue, because this is simply life. It is neither shameful nor strange, only the rhythm of existence in a world that has not yet imagined another way. The smell settles into the air, mingling with wood smoke and the faint sweetness of wet hay. As you walk back toward your home, the sun begins to rise behind the fog. It is pale and distant, but it marks another day in medieval Europe, a world where comfort is rare, where every sound and scent feels closer, more real, more constant. And though the morning is harsh, it moves slowly, gently, as if time itself were half asleep. Outside, the village begins to stir. A low murmur of footsteps on stone, the sound of wooden pails scraping against the ground, and somewhere in the distance, a cartwheel creaks as it turns slowly through the narrow lane. The streets of the medieval town are not roads as we know them. They are shallow channels where life and waste move together. Through them runs a sluggish, gray river of refuse, water from the kitchens, droppings from passing animals, and the daily remains of hundreds of households. People walk along the edges carefully, avoiding the center where the liquid gathers. The smell is sharp and constant, but no one pays much attention anymore. It is the ordinary scent of survival, strong, unpleasant, and familiar. The city has no pipes, no drains, only gravity and rain to carry things away. When it rains, everything flows a little faster, though never far enough. If you are fortunate, your town might have a public latrine. It is a simple structure, a place to sit beside strangers in the dim light, shoulder to shoulder in silence. The air is heavy and still. Ventilation is a dream. There is no privacy, only acceptance. As people go about what must be done, the floor beneath is often stone, worn smooth by years of use, and beneath it runs a trench where waste collects and eventually drains away. Slowly, almost thoughtfully, toward the same streets you must later walk again. No one has yet imagined the idea of toilet paper. Instead, you reach for what is near: straw, leaves, old rags, or soft moss from the fields. Sometimes, if fortune allows, a scrap of worn wool. Many times, nothing at all. Cleanliness is not measured by absence of dirt, but by endurance of it. And so, you endure. Those of higher rank fare only slightly better. In castles, there are small chambers built into the outer walls, narrow stone passages with a seat and a hole that opens directly above the moat below. They are called garderobes, and they seem clever at first, until you realize what waits beneath them. The water below carries everything away, but also everything back. In times of siege, when enemies surround the walls, even these small comforts become a danger. There are stories, quiet ones, of attackers finding their way into castles through those same shafts, climbing upward through darkness and filth. No matter who you are, from farmer to lord, this simple act is a daily reminder of how close all lives are to the earth, and how easily dignity dissolves into necessity. One misplaced step on the wet stones outside can leave you face down in the same muddy street where your neighbors emptied their buckets only hours ago. You do not cry out, you simply rise, brush away what you can, and continue. This is life. Now, with the morning's unpleasant duties behind you, your body begins to long for food. But hunger in this age is not the same as appetite. It is a quiet, constant ache that rarely fades. You return indoors, where a small fire smolders, filling the air with a thin line of smoke that curls toward the roof and escapes through the cracks. Near the fire sits your meal, or what passes for one. Breakfast is plain and gray. A wooden bowl holds a thick, lumpy mixture that has been simmering for days, the same stew your family eats morning after morning. It is called pottage. Within it float small grains, bits of root vegetables, perhaps a few beans if luck was kind. When something new is added to the pot, the old is never removed. It all blends into one slow, continuous meal that seems to have no beginning and no end. The taste is simple, earthy, and faintly sour. Beside the bowl rests a piece of bread. It is heavy, made from coarse rye or barley, sometimes mixed with ground acorns, husks, or bits of bark to stretch the flour further. The crust is hard enough to dull a knife. You hold it for a moment in your hand, feeling its weight, and soften it in the warm pottage before you take a bite. Wheat bread is a luxury reserved for those who live in stone houses with servants to bake it. For most, the dark loaf is all there is, and all there will ever be. There is no milk to pour, no coffee to brew, no sweet fruits to brighten the morning. Instead, there is ale, thin, weak, and cloudy. The water from the wells carries illness, so even children drink this mild beer. It is not for pleasure, but for safety. The taste is bitter and warm, yet it is what keeps people alive. You eat slowly, without joy, without conversation. The room is still except for the quiet crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of chewing. Each mouthful feels heavy, and yet it must last, for the day ahead will demand much from a body given so little. Meat is a memory from feast days, cheese a rare indulgence, fruit only for a few short weeks in summer. Spices belong to a distant world of merchants and kings. Salt itself is precious enough to be locked away. And so, you eat what you have, as your parents did, and their parents before them. The same food, the same bowl, the same silence. When the meal is done, you wipe your hands on your tunic. There is no linen cloth to spare, and you stand to prepare for the day's labor. Your clothing does not change, because there is nothing to change into. One tunic, one shift, one pair of worn shoes if you are fortunate. The wool is rough and heavy, its fibers thick with old dust and the scent of smoke. You pull it over your head, and tighten the rope belt at your waist. It is the same garment you have worn for months, perhaps for years. Its weight is familiar, its texture part of your skin. Outside, the morning light has softened to a pale gold. The mist still clings to the rooftops, and in the distance, the church bell rings again, slower this time, as though the sound itself has grown weary. You take a deep breath, let it out, and step forward into another day that will unfold much like the last. Your morning begins with the slow process of getting dressed, though there is little to choose from. In this world, there is no such thing as fashion, no changing wardrobes with the seasons, and no careful selection of colors or patterns. There is only what you own, and what you own is what you wear, until it falls apart. When it finally does, you patch it, stitch it, or hand it down until the fabric itself gives up. If you are fortunate, you might have a thin linen garment worn beneath your wool tunic. It softens the roughness of the wool just enough to make the day bearable. But if you do not, the coarse fibers rest directly against your skin, scratching, heating, and irritating until you forget what comfort ever felt like. Underwear is optional, mostly because few can afford the extra cloth to make it. Your tunic is made by hand, perhaps by someone in your household who learned from imitation rather than instruction. The seams are uneven, the thread heavy, the garment smells faintly of smoke, soil, and something sweetly sour, the scent of living too close to everything. There is no soap in the modern sense, no gentle lather or fresh scent. Washing is a rare act of labor. To clean your clothing, you must carry water from the river in a heavy bucket. Then it must be warmed over a fire, mixed with ashes or lye, and scrubbed by hand against a rough board. The water is cold, the air colder, and your fingers ache from the effort. Once clean, if you can call it that, the garment is left to dry in the open air, hanging limp on a line. The sun does not visit often, and when it does, its light is weak and pale. Shoes are a luxury. If you are among the few who own a pair, they are simple pieces of untreated leather stitched roughly together. The soles are thin, the fit uncertain, and they offer little protection. The ground beneath you is always damp and uneven, full of stones, puddles, and other less pleasant things. Many go barefoot, their feet hardened and calloused from years of walking through mud, dung, and dust. The earth leaves its marks, and no one thinks much of it. All this leaves your body in a constant state of quiet irritation. Your skin feels stretched and dry. Small bites appear and fade, replaced by new ones. Fleas and lice are everywhere, in the folds of your clothes, the seams of your bedding, and the roots of your hair. They live on everyone. from peasants to priests, from nobles in their castles to monks in their cloisters. You scratch absently as you speak to a neighbor, or as you kneel in prayer. It is simply part of being alive. Your scalp is a map of small battles, your arms marked by tiny red trails. Rashes come and go, and when they do, there is nothing to be done but wait. There are no ointments, no physicians trained in such small discomforts. A rash might stay with you through a whole season, growing familiar like a shadow that never quite fades. Once dressed, you prepare to face the world, not refreshed, but ready enough. The air outside is still cool. You take a deep breath and release it slowly, though even that feels rough in the throat. The morning light filters gently through the mist, silver and soft, and for a moment there is quiet. But soon, the silence gives way to another truth of life in this time, the state of one's teeth. You do not smile much, not because of pride or sadness, but because smiling exposes what everyone prefers to hide. There is no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no routine of washing away the night. Most people chew a dry twig to clean their mouth, or rinse with wine if they can spare it. Some use vinegar, but many do nothing at all. Decay is slow and steady, and by the time you reach your middle 20s, it has already taken hold. Teeth darken, gums swell, and pain becomes a companion. You learn to chew carefully, to favor one side of the mouth, to live with the dull ache that hums behind your jaw. Sugar has begun to arrive from distant lands, a rare treasure reserved for those with wealth enough to waste it. It glitters like crystal, and nobles use it not only to sweeten food, but to show their fortune. They will suffer for it in time, as their teeth crumble and their gums recede. For the poor, the damage comes slower, through coarse bread filled with grit, and years of hard chewing that wear the enamel thin. When a tooth begins to throb, you endure it for as long as you can. There are no doctors to call, no relief to seek. You might pray or drink or press a cloth against your cheek to dull the ache. If it becomes unbearable, there is only one path left. You go to the barber. The man who trims hair draws blood and pulls teeth. His tools are simple: a metal hook, a knife, and steady hands. There is no medicine to numb the pain, no clean water to wash the wound. He works by candlelight, and the sound of iron against bone echoes quietly in the small room. If the wound becomes infected, there is nothing to be done. A fever might follow, slow and relentless. Many do not survive it. Something as simple as a toothache, a small pain we now forget with a tablet or a visit to the dentist, could end a life in this century. It is a quiet reminder that every comfort we know was once unimaginable. You swallow carefully, the taste of stale ale still on your tongue, and continue with your day. Around you, the village begins to move again, slow, patient, burdened by the weight of living. And though everything feels hard, the rhythm of the day carries on, as it always has, steady as the tolling of the distant bell. There is little comfort to be found among others. Conversation, if it happens, is brief and practical. People do not speak much of feelings, nor of beauty, nor of dreams. Even affection is shaped by survival. Kissing is rare, and when it does occur, it is an act of greeting or obligation rather than desire. Breath is heavy and sour in every mouth, for halitosis, the constant ghost of decay, lingers on everyone's lips. It is not judged, it is simply known. If you are single, no one looks at your smile or the brightness in your eyes. Instead, they ask what you own, how many animals, how much land, and whether your thatched roof leaks less than your neighbor's. Attraction is measured in grain, in goats, and in the quiet endurance of hunger. Your mouth is a battlefield, and it has long since lost the war. When the slow ache of your teeth returns, there is nothing to be done but continue. You step outside into the pale morning light, your breath meeting the cool air in a faint mist. The world beyond your door is already moving. The sound of footsteps on wet earth, the low groan of a cart, a rooster calling from somewhere beyond the fences. It is time to work. There are no offices, no desks, and no schedules to check. The day begins when the sun rises and ends when it slips beyond the line of trees. If you are like nearly everyone else, you are a peasant, a laborer of the soil. You work not for wealth, not even for comfort, but for survival, and for the distant lord whose land you till but never truly own. Your tools are few: a wooden hoe, a dull sickle, a spade worn smooth from years of use. The air smells of wet soil and smoke. The earth beneath your feet is heavy from the last rain, clinging to your boots, soaking into the hem of your tunic. You bend and lift, dig and sow, the same motions your ancestors made for generations. The sound of tools against ground is the rhythm of the day. There is no rest. You pause only long enough to catch your breath before continuing. The body aches, but there is no language for complaint here. No one asks if you are tired. No one wonders how you are. You work because you must. If you are a woman, the labor stretches further. The fields are only part of your day. When you return home, there is grain to grind, bread to bake, wool to spin, and children to tend. Animals wait to be fed, floors to be swept, and fires to be kept alive. The hours blur together and your body, always moving, never fully rests. Children begin working almost as soon as they can stand without falling. At 5 or 6, they carry water, chase hens, and pick stones from the soil. They have no school, no toys, and few moments of play. Their laughter comes in brief flashes between chores. The rest of the time they are small hands learning large burdens. If you are one of the few not bound to the land, perhaps you are a blacksmith, a tanner, or a cooper. You labor beside fire, smoke, or the thick smell of treated hides. The work is constant and close, done by candlelight or daylight, always with your body leaning toward exhaustion. Payment comes not in coins, but in the right to live another week. Accidents happen quietly and often. A deep cut, a broken bone, a fever. Each is its own small test. There are no bandages, no medicine, no rest days. If you cannot work, someone else takes your place. The fields do not wait. The forge does not cool. The livestock do not feed themselves. You grip your tool again and continue. The blisters on your palms have long since hardened into calluses, but the ache remains. You work not toward progress but toward endurance. Each motion a quiet plea for one more day. The sky above you turns gray as clouds gather, and the day shifts toward its next struggle. The weather itself. The seasons offer no comfort, only new forms of hardship. In winter, the air seeps through every crack in your wooden walls. There is no glass, no insulation, only cloth stretched across small openings to keep out the worst of the wind. The fire burns weakly in the hearth, its warmth thin and fleeting. You gather close to it, wrapped in your one damp tunic, as the cold seeps through to your bones. Wood is precious, often too costly to burn freely. Gathering it from the Lord's forest is forbidden, an act that can be punished with death. And so you burn straw, twigs, or whatever scraps you can find, watching the flames fade too soon. The nights are long. You lie awake and listen to the wind pressing against the walls, the sound of the thatch shifting above. Your fingers are stiff, your feet cold and damp, your nose numb. Frost gathers at the edges of the door. You whisper a prayer that the morning will come quickly. When it does, the world outside is white and silent. The ground is frozen, too hard to till, and work slows only because it must. You move carefully, each breath a small cloud before your face. Frostbite is not a word you know. It is simply misfortune, a hand that darkens, a toe that no longer feels. And when the seasons turn, you might imagine relief. But summer brings its own quiet punishment. The air grows thick, heavy, and still. The small home that once held in the cold now traps the heat. The walls turn the room into a clay oven. There is no wind, no fan, and no escape. Sweat gathers beneath your clothes, but you cannot remove them. To do so would be improper, indecent, and dangerous. The sun beats down on the fields, and you work beneath it, the light blinding and the air shimmering with warmth. Your skin burns, insects bite, and the flies come in swarms, drawn to every open wound, every scent of labor and life. You brush them away without thought. The smell of the home, of people, and of food long past its freshness hangs in the still air. Even in the night, the heat does not fade. You lie awake, the hum of mosquitoes near your ear, and wait for the darkness to end. If you can manage to rest at all, it will not be in silence. The night air carries every sound: the faint argument from the next hut, the sharp cry of a baby, the restless shifting of animals in their stalls. The thin walls do little to soften it. Sleep, when it comes, arrives lightly and leaves at the smallest noise. When the sun returns, it does not bring relief. Out in the fields, the heat presses down like a weight. There are no hats, no shade, and certainly no balm for the skin. You might twist straw into a crude covering for your head, but it offers little comfort. The sun burns without mercy. There is no word for sunblock here, no notion of protection, only endurance. If you stumble or feel faint, they call it a bad turn. There is no rest, no remedy. You steady yourself, drink a little, and keep going. Your hands grow slick with sweat, your clothes cling to your body, and the day stretches endlessly toward dusk, whether shivering through the brittle cold of winter or wilting under the heavy air of summer. The outcome is the same: discomfort. The seasons change, yet the hardship remains constant. Your clothes itch year-round. Your food is coarse, often bland, sometimes spoiled. And there is always another task waiting once the last one is done. This is climate control, medieval style, the kind that cannot be adjusted or escaped. The weather simply happens to you. If thirst comes, as it often does, you think of water, cool, clear water. You imagine washing your face, rinsing the dust from your lips. But in these times, water is no friend. It looks pure in the sunlight, trickling gently through the grass, yet every drop hides a quiet danger. The stream near the village seems clean, but upstream someone has emptied a chamber pot into it, and further beyond, a dead animal may be lying half submerged, the current carrying its decay downstream. Invisible life, the kind no one yet understands, multiplies within the flow: bacteria, parasites, and sickness that travels unseen. Because of this, most people do not drink water at all. They drink beer, a mild and cloudy brew known as small beer. Even children sip it daily, not for pleasure, but because it is safer than what runs in the streams. The brewing process boils the water, killing what might otherwise kill them. It contains only a trace of alcohol, enough to preserve, not to intoxicate. For the fortunate few, there is wine, a luxury of the wealthy, served from clay jugs and drunk throughout the day. It is not refreshing, but it is trusted, and trust is worth more than flavor. As for washing, yes, water is used, but rarely. In theory, bathing cleanses the body. In practice, many believe it opens the pores and invites disease. Dirt, they think, is a kind of armor, a layer that keeps the bad air, the miasma, from seeping in. Cleanliness is considered dangerous, even unwise. Public bathhouses exist in some towns, shared spaces with warm water, chatter, and gossip. Over time, they gather reputations for more than bathing, and the church, wary of their influence, orders many of them closed. The act of bathing becomes a suspicion rather than a virtue. Even if one wishes to bathe at home, it is not a simple task. Water must be drawn from a well, carried in heavy buckets, poured into a wooden tub that leaks from its seams. Firewood must be gathered and burned to warm it. The process takes hours, and the water cools almost as soon as it is ready. In most homes, there is only enough for one person, and the rest must wait or reuse what remains. Rainwater is another option. Barrels left beneath the eaves fill slowly with runoff from the roof, catching leaves, insects, and the traces of birds that pass overhead. The water sits and grows cloudy. A green film gathers along the rim. Yet when there is no other choice, it must suffice. Water, the giver of life, is also the quiet thief of it. To drink it unboiled is to risk days of fever, the body trembling and burning, the stomach twisting with pain. Many do not recover. When you next raise a glass of clean water, think of them, the countless lives that ended not in battle or famine, but from a single careless sip. Perhaps you are one of them now. A misstep, a drink too quickly taken, or perhaps just misfortune. Your body aches, your head burns, your stomach turns. You lie upon the straw, unable to rise. You are ill and you need help, but help is not what it means today. In the Middle Ages, medicine is uncertain, guided more by faith than by knowledge. Doctors are rare, their wisdom shaped by old books and older superstitions. Healing begins not with treatment, but with explanation, and that explanation rests upon the four humors. They say every person is governed by these four elements of the body: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is a matter of balance, and sickness is imbalance. If you cough, you have too much phlegm. If your skin yellows, your bile overflows. If you seem melancholic, then black bile has gathered within you. The cure, naturally, is to restore the balance. How that balance is restored depends on the imagination of your physician, or priest, in the quiet chambers of medieval medicine. Healing was more faith than science, and far more pain than comfort. According to the learned physicians of the time, the human body was a vessel of four sacred fluids, the humors, and health depended upon keeping them in perfect harmony. These were blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and together they formed the invisible balance that ruled every life. When that balance was disturbed, sickness followed. A fever, for instance, was thought to mean too much blood. The cure, simple and terrifying, was to remove some of it. And so the practice of bloodletting began, a slow draining of one's strength into a wooden bowl, guided by a steady hand, and the quiet faith that weakness would bring wellness. Sometimes the tool was a blade, often dull from use. Sometimes a handful of leeches, pressed gently to the skin, were left to drink until the physician was satisfied. The same man who trimmed your beard or cut your hair might be the one to open your veins, the barber surgeon, a familiar figure with sharp tools and a steady voice. You might leave his chair a little lighter, a little paler, and hopefully a little healthier if sorrow or melancholy weighed upon the mind. It was said that black bile had grown in excess. The treatment might involve purging, herbal concoctions, bitter to the taste, meant to cleanse the body of unseen imbalance. Sometimes the cure was prayer, sometimes a cold cloth pressed to the forehead, and often simply waiting for the sickness to pass, if it ever did. Injuries, however, left little room for faith. A broken limb, a deep wound, or the infection that followed could mean days of agony. There was no comfort to be found in sleep or medicine. Anesthetic did not exist, except for the faint mercy of fainting. A surgeon's blade, unwashed and blackened by age, was heated over fire, not to clean it, but to make it glow menacingly, as though heat itself might frighten the sickness away. Antibiotics were centuries distant, germs still undiscovered. Illness came not from bacteria but from bad air, foul vapors, or perhaps God's displeasure. A cough was moral weakness. A fever, divine correction. Every sickness had a lesson in it, and the physician was there to interpret what the heavens meant. If you complained of pain in the belly, they might say your thoughts were impure, your spirit unbalanced. You confessed, you prayed, you waited, and perhaps you endured leeches again. There were no hospitals as we know them, only monasteries, where monks mixed herbs and whispered prayers over the suffering. Some recovered, many did not. When death grew near, the priest would be called. He would arrive softly, perhaps with a candle or a psalm. The doctor, uncertain of success, would step aside, and together they would prepare you for the final cure, the one that ended all pain. If by some quiet miracle you lived, the credit went to divine mercy, never to medicine. The leech, of course, was thanked as well. After such trials of the body, the day would draw toward its close. The fields would grow quiet, the air cool again, and the smell of earth would rise. You returned to your small hut, weary from labor and healing alike, hoping only for a warm meal. But the comfort of food is not guaranteed. Dinner in the Middle Ages was an exercise in survival. There were no pantries filled with jars, no cold storage to keep meat safe. Preservation depended on salt, smoke, or sheer hope. A haunch of meat, if you were fortunate enough to have it, hung from a hook for days, coated in brine or dusted with ash to keep insects away. But flies were persistent, and rats bolder still. You might scrape off what seemed too dark and eat the rest. Bread formed the foundation of every meal, yet even bread could betray you. In poor harvest years, flour was stretched with whatever could be found: sawdust, crushed bark, ground beans, even earth. The loaves were dense, dry, and often carried the faint bitterness of survival itself. During some seasons, rye bread brought a hidden danger: ergot, a fungus that crept into the grain. Those who ate it suffered visions, convulsions, or quiet madness. Some called it a curse, others divine punishment, but few connected it to the bread itself. Vegetables appeared only when the soil allowed. Turnips were the constant companion of the poor, boiled, mashed, and stewed until their taste became memory itself. Pottage, the great medieval dish, simmered endlessly in the pot by the hearth. New ingredients were added daily to the remnants of old meals, so that what you ate tonight might have begun its life weeks ago. Fruits were brief joys of autumn, sweet but fleeting, spoiling as quickly as they ripened. Sugar was a treasure for the wealthy, more symbol than substance, a luxury displayed to show the decay it caused in noble teeth. Milk soured within hours, and butter and cheese, though beloved, were always uncertain. Comfort mixed with risk. For seasoning, the common man turned to onions, herbs, and sometimes a pinch of salt, true spices. Pepper, cinnamon, saffron, nutmeg were riches beyond imagination. A handful could equal a laborer's yearly earnings, and so, for most, flavor came not from the spice of the world, but from endurance. The food was heavy, gray, and without pleasure, but it kept the body alive, and that was all it needed to do. There were dangers beyond the plate as well. The forests and fields were ruled not by hunger, but by law. To hunt, to trap, to fish, all were privileges of the Lord whose land you served. To snare a rabbit or catch a stag without permission was not a small crime. It could mean imprisonment, mutilation, or death. And so, as you sat by the dim fire, stirring your thin stew, you ate quietly, carefully. Each bite was a bargain with nature and authority alike. The warmth of the meal, faint as it was, carried you through another day of living. As evening settled and the sky deepened into quiet blue, the sound of the church bells returned. Their tones marked the hours not just of time but of obedience. In this world, faith governed everything: the rhythm of labor, the shape of the seasons, even the thoughts in your heart. Religion was not simply practiced, it was woven into the air itself. It told you when to rise, when to eat, when to fast, when to confess. The church shaped law and learning, birth and burial alike. Its voice echoed from every village tower, its presence constant as the sky. To live was to listen. And so, when the bells rang again, calling the faithful to prayer, you bowed your head. Even the tired, the hungry, and the doubtful obeyed, for to ignore the sound was to risk not just disfavor, but the weight of eternity. Life, in those centuries, moves in rhythm with bells, prayers, and the soft murmur of fear that never truly leaves the air. People live under the long shadow of the church, and even their dreams are not their own. a stray thought, an imagined desire, something as small as thinking kindly of another's wife. These too can weigh on the soul. Sin, they are told, seeps into everything. The priests speak of it in measured, vivid tones, of rivers of fire, of boiling blood, of wailing souls suspended forever between flame and despair. And so, the people kneel a little longer. They whisper a little softer. The fear of eternal punishment lingers in every heart, shaping even the smallest acts of daily life. Few can read the Bible. The sacred text is locked away in Latin, a language known only to the monks, the clergy, and the rare noble child who will never till the soil. Ordinary people must rely entirely on their priest to explain the word of God, and so faith becomes obedience. If the priest says a storm or a poor harvest is punishment for weak devotion, then the villagers will kneel again in the cold chapel, whispering their apologies to a silent sky. Tithes are due, 1/10 of everything, no matter how little one owns. Wheat, eggs, or the faint hope of coins must all go to the church. For those who have nothing to give, there is still the debt of guilt, a constant reminder that poverty is not just a burden but a spiritual failing. The calendar itself is owned by faith. The holy days arrive often, but they are not celebrations, they are duties, long hours of prayer, fasting, and repentance. Joy is viewed with suspicion. Laughter is a luxury of the damned. To question any of this is unthinkable. The word heretic carries the chill of death. Those who doubt too loudly risk being burned, drowned, or quietly erased from the world. So people continue, not out of conviction, but because survival depends on silence. They pray, they bow, they confess, and they hope, quietly, patiently, that heaven will be gentler than earth. For in this age God may be merciful, but the church is not. And yet, if life is hard for a man, it is far harsher for a woman. To be born female in these centuries is to be handed a burden before one can even walk. Childhood is brief, innocence shorter still. A girl's destiny is not her own. She will marry young, often before she has known what it means to choose. And her life will unfold in a narrow circle of duty, to serve her husband, to bear his children, and to keep the home standing between winters. Education is a privilege that passes her by, unless she is born noble and sent to a convent, where learning is wrapped in silence and prayer. Marriage is rarely about affection. It is an arrangement, a trade of land, livestock, and alliances. A wife is not her husband's partner but his property. Her body and her labor belong to the household. Her voice is rarely heard. If she complains, she risks ridicule. If she persists, she risks her life. The word witch hovers in the air like a shadow, an accusation that can fall on any woman who is different, outspoken, or simply unlucky. Childbirth is its own quiet battlefield. There are no physicians, no clean instruments, no promise of survival. The midwife does what she can with what she knows, but the line between life and death is thin and often crossed in silence. For many, motherhood is the beginning of exhaustion that never ends. Babies cry through the night. The work never stops. A woman's rest is a myth whispered by others. She is expected to endure, to give, and to smile through pain, because to falter is weakness, and weakness is sin. Those who are not married are seen as strange, and those who are widowed are left unprotected. The world looks at such women with suspicion, too independent, too free, too close to the unknown. Even within convent walls, women live under strict rules. They speak only when permitted, move only when ordered, and even in their devotion they remain below men. To be a woman in the Middle Ages is to live within narrow limits, and yet within those limits, countless quiet acts of strength occur, caring for the sick, teaching children, tending fields, surviving loss after loss without recognition. Their endurance becomes invisible, as if history itself has grown accustomed to looking past them. But suffering does not end with labor or faith or birth. It continues in the form of violence. Ordinary, expected, woven into the rhythm of life. There is little sense of law as we understand it. Authority is the mood of the moment, often decided by whoever holds the sword. Quarrels are settled with fists, knives, or fire. Even homes are not safe. A drunken husband's anger, a neighbor's suspicion, a lord's command, all can bring ruin in an instant. The streets echo with shouts and fear. Punishment is not meant to correct, but to warn. A thief might lose a hand. A liar might have their tongue pierced. Those who gossip too freely may wear the scold's bridle, a cold iron mask with a bar that silences the mouth. Justice, when it appears, is slow and theatrical, meant to remind everyone watching that mercy is not part of the design. In such a world, people learn to live quietly, to keep their heads down, to avoid the notice of those with power. Survival is not about bravery or defiance. It is about patience. It is about outlasting the cruelty of the day and finding some small comfort in the stillness of night, beneath a sky that does not judge. War, in the Middle Ages, is not a distant event reserved for kings and soldiers. It seeps into the ground, into the lives of those who never hold a sword. When lords quarrel or kings seek glory, the people pay the price in silence. Armies march not with ceremony but with hunger, ragged men with dull blades and patched tunics, their faces streaked with sweat and dust. They move through fields that once fed families, leaving behind trampled crops, empty barns, and quiet houses that will never be full again. For the ordinary villager, battle is not glory. It is a rumor first, a sound carried by the wind, the echo of hooves, the distant clang of iron. Then, it becomes a shadow at the edge of the fields, a fire on the horizon, the dull thud of boots on soft earth. Soldiers pass through like storms, and the people wait for the calm that may never come. They hide what food they can, bury what they love, and pray that the tide of war moves past without noticing them. Those taken to fight rarely return the same, if they return at all. There are no medics, no rest, no understanding of what the body or mind endures. Wounds fester, bones heal crooked. The lucky ones lose only a limb, the unlucky lose their peace. At night, after the noise fades, men sit in the dark and stare at their hands, unable to remember which cause demanded their suffering. Cities fare no better. Behind stone walls, the smell of fear mixes with smoke. Sieges last for months, sometimes years. Food dwindles, water spoils, and disease becomes the more patient killer. Those inside pray not for victory but for an end, any end. And when the gates finally fall, mercy is rare. Looting and fire erase what law once promised. Afterward, silence hangs heavy over the ruins, a quiet deeper than prayer. Violence is not only in the wars between kingdoms. It lives in the smaller corners of daily life, in taverns after too much ale, in narrow alleys where disputes turn sharp, in homes where anger finds no outlet but the nearest soul. People grow used to pain as they do to weather, something that arrives without permission and leaves when it wishes. The body learns to bend beneath it. The spirit learns to wait it out. Justice, when it appears, is as unpredictable as the sky. A crime may go unpunished for years, or a rumor may end a life in a day. Trials are less about truth than spectacle. A man's fate can hang on the word of someone with louder faith or deeper pockets. Torture is not seen as cruelty, but as evidence of zeal. Those who confess under agony are said to be purified by pain, though everyone knows that truth bends easily beneath fear. And yet, amidst all this, life goes on. The bells still ring in the morning. The fields still call for hands to work them. Children still chase each other through dust and mud, unaware that they are growing into the same weary cycle that shaped their parents. The world continues, not because it is kind, but because there is no other choice. At night, the village grows quiet again. The fires dim, and the air fills with the small sounds of sleep, the creak of wood, the rustle of straw, the distant call of an owl. In that darkness, one might imagine peace, though it is only rest borrowed from tomorrow's burdens. People whisper short prayers, not for riches or change, but for one more sunrise, one more day that does not end in fire. The medieval world, seen through calm eyes, is a landscape of endurance. It is not a time of heroes or villains, but of ordinary souls surviving the weight of centuries. The wars, the hunger, the punishments, they pass. What remains is the quiet persistence of those who continue despite it all. In the still, dim light of a gray morning, the sound of accusation spreads faster than the fog itself. In a world where fear and faith share the same breath, a whisper is enough to unravel a life. Heresy, theft, witchcraft, words spoken softly but carrying the weight of a death sentence. There are no lawyers, no fair hearings, no presumption of innocence, only the cold belief that truth reveals itself through pain. If you are accused, the path ahead is narrow and cruel. You might be told to plunge your hand into boiling water and retrieve a stone. The crowd watches as the skin blisters and peels. Then you wait, 3 days, silent and feverish, while neighbors inspect your wounds. If infection spreads, you are guilty. If not, perhaps God has spared you. Another test might send you into the river, tied and trembling. Sink, and you are innocent but gone. Float, and the flames or the rope will finish what the water could not. It is a strange sort of justice, one where pain stands in for proof, and survival itself feels like defiance. The crowd gathers not in outrage, but in routine. It is the rhythm of the age, where cruelty hides behind faith, and fairness is a word no one has learned to speak. When the verdict is death, the day is treated like a festival. People leave their work to watch. Some bring bread, some bring their children, and some come only for the noise. A hanging, a beheading, a burning. Each is a grim kind of theater. The condemned is both sinner and spectacle, a reminder of what happens when the world decides it no longer needs you. There is cheering, laughter, the crack of wood and rope. Then, when it's done, the people go home. Supper must still be made. The animals still need feeding. Violence, in this age, is not a collapse of order, but its foundation. It lives in the home, in the market, on the road, in the silence between neighbors. Husbands strike their wives under the banner of discipline, and no one intervenes. Street fights erupt over spilled ale or a sideways glance. Even the churchyard, a place of rest, sometimes echoes with the clash of blades when tempers rise. You learn quickly to walk softly, to keep your eyes down, and to hope that the anger of others never finds your name. And yet, for all this, life continues. The fields still demand their due. The seasons still turn, dragging the weary along with them. People laugh, but rarely for long. They pray, but always with one eye open. Every joy is quiet, brief, and borrowed from the edge of fear. Eventually, all things slow. The body, worn thin by work and weather, begins to falter. In the Middle Ages, death does not arrive with ceremony. It simply steps in when you can no longer rise from your straw bed. To live beyond 40 is an accomplishment whispered about in admiration. The old one, they might call you, half in awe, half in disbelief. Most never reach that age. Half of all children never make it past their 5th year. Fevers come and go like passing clouds, taking small bodies with them. A cough, a cut, a chill. Any could be the end. There are no medicines, no safety, only prayers murmured into the cold. If you survive childhood, your reward is a life of labor. By 20, your back aches. By 30, your teeth are gone. By 40, you count every sunrise as a quiet victory. For women, the risk never ends. Each birth is a wager with death, each contraction a crossing between worlds. There are no clean tools, no trained hands, no comfort, but the soft murmur of another woman who has seen too much of this before. blood loss, fever, infection. They claim lives in silence. The survivors rise again too soon, with new mouths to feed and the same endless work waiting outside the door. For men, death comes differently but just as steadily. An accident in the field, a rusted blade, a drunken brawl, a war that no one will remember. Sometimes it comes through famine, when the harvest fails and the earth turns hard. Other times it drifts in through the air, the plague, unseen, unstoppable, moving from house to house until the streets fall quiet. When death finally comes, it is simple. A shallow grave, a few words, a bit of earth pushed over by tired hands. The smell of the living must not linger too long beside the dead. There are no polished coffins, no long goodbyes, only the soft closing of a chapter that was never truly yours to begin with. And so, the medieval world continues, heavy and slow. Each day, a repetition. Each life, a borrowed story. There is little glory here, little comfort, only endurance, and the quiet dignity of those who kept going because there was no other choice. The night settles, the fires fade, somewhere, far from the noise of fear and judgment, the wind moves through the fields, slow, even, eternal. The world rests for a moment before beginning again. And so, we arrive at the final chapter of your day in medieval Europe, the slow descent toward night. The day, as you have lived it, began with filth, discomfort, and uncertainty, and it ends much the same way. You awoke in a bed of straw, surrounded by the sounds and smells of the humble hut. You relieved yourself into a bucket, brushed your teeth with little more than hope, endured the hunger gnawing at your stomach, and worked until your back and shoulders ached, as though they were made of iron bent repeatedly under unseen hands. You shuffled through wool that itched incessantly, prayed against the unseen threat of disease, and narrowly avoided calamities that seem unimaginable today, accusations, punishments, or even death over small mistakes or possessions. The dream of knighthood, the romanticized notion of chivalry and adventure, fades quickly under the weight of this reality. The castles, swordsmen, great halls, and heroic deeds of fairy tales and modern imagination existed only in stories. Life in the medieval world was unrelenting. Hierarchies determined everything. If you were born poor, you remained so. If you were born rich, you had only a slightly better chance of survival. Even the wealthiest nobles were not free from hardship. Castles were cold, drafty, and filled with fleas. Smoke from hearths lingered endlessly, and political machinations often determined marriages, fortunes, and deaths. Luxury was rare, and comfort was temporary. Simple tasks took effort. Every bite of food could bring illness. Every birth carried risk, and every step outside your door invited danger. Yet, even in these harsh conditions, life persisted. People found small joys wherever they could. Children ran through the mud with laughter despite aching bodies. Songs were hummed quietly while tending the fields, and stories were shared at the dim glow of a hearth. Love, fleeting as it was, found its way into the cold and the filth. Humans, as always, proved remarkably resilient, carving out moments of light amidst relentless toil. As the medieval day ended, it is easy to imagine the quiet, subdued rhythm of the village settling into night. The fires died down to embers, the animals rested, and the people, weary and aching, collapsed onto their straw beds. They closed their eyes not with peace, but with the hope of one more sunrise. The world, indifferent and sometimes cruel, continued around them, steady and slow. And then, as the narrative turns to a different story, we shift to a different time, a different world, the early 18th century, and a young girl named Sophie. Long before she would become Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia, she was a small, observant child born into a minor German princely family in 1729. Her beginnings were quiet and unremarkable, yet she possessed a keen intelligence and a subtle charm that set her apart. Her upbringing was strict. Her mother was calculating and distant, and her father a disciplined, somewhat aloof officer. Sophie learned early to navigate the expectations placed upon her, absorbing languages, observing people, and quietly learning the art of patience and strategy. At 14, Sophie was summoned to Russia to marry Grand Duke Peter. She arrived in St. Petersburg in 1744, young, adaptable, and entirely aware of the delicate balance she must maintain in a foreign court. To fit into the Orthodox society she was entering, she converted, taking the name Ekaterina Alexeyevna, Catherine. The ceremony marked a significant transformation, not just a change of religion, but a crossing into a world where every gesture, every word, and every glance carried political weight. She stepped into a world that was vast, cold, and unwelcoming, yet one that she would soon learn to navigate with extraordinary acumen. Catherine's marriage to Peter was less a union of hearts than a political arrangement. Peter, withdrawn and immature, more interested in toys and military play than the affairs of a throne, contrasted sharply with Catherine's intense curiosity and determination. While he sought escape, she embraced the empire, learning its language, studying its history, and mastering its rituals. Every day was a study in observation, adaptation, and quiet planning. She could not trust her husband, her mother still whispering on foreign interests' behalf, or even her servants. Yet within these constraints, Sophie, Catherine, began her patient ascent, preparing to claim influence, power, and ultimately her place in history. The medieval world and the early modern courts of Europe, though separated by centuries, share a rhythm of endurance, adaptation, and human persistence. In both, life was slow, exacting, and relentless, and yet those who navigated it left traces that echo through time. And now, as you settle into your own comfortable evening, with warmth, light, and quiet, it is worth reflecting on the patience, resilience, and fortitude required to exist in these past worlds. A meditation on survival, endurance, and the quiet persistence of ordinary lives. As night falls over the medieval village, the day finally eases into silence. The straw beds, damp and uncomfortable, now cradle bodies that have endured the sun, the cold, the hunger, the fleas, and the unending labor. The animals rest near the wooden walls of the huts. The fire dwindles to soft embers, and the faint light of the moon filters through the gaps in the thatched roofs. In these quiet hours, the village breathes slowly, each inhale and exhale a reminder of life persisting through hardship. There is no hurry here, no clamor, no urgent meetings, no deadlines. Only the steady rhythm of the night, punctuated perhaps by the soft bleat of a goat, the creak of timber, or the distant tolling of a church bell. The air, though cold and musty, carries with it the muted harmony of human and animal existence, interwoven in a way that is ordinary, unremarkable, yet wholly necessary. Even in this world of scarcity and suffering, humans find quiet moments of endurance and resilience. Children, exhausted from a day's work, eventually settle into sleep beside their parents, clutching small remnants of warmth. Perhaps a mother hums a soft lullaby, the tune nearly lost in the ambient sounds of the village, or perhaps a father sits silently, mending a tool or garment by the faint light of a dying fire. These small actions, repetitive and measured, create continuity in a life otherwise dictated by uncertainty. Life here is a collection of simple, slow movements: chopping wood, fetching water, stirring pottage, tending animals, weaving wool, and praying at the small altar in the corner. Each task, though monotonous, is a rhythm in which survival is entwined. The repetitiveness itself becomes soothing over time, a lullaby of ordinary endurance. Sleep, when it finally comes, arrives unceremoniously. There are no mattresses of comfort, no warm blankets stacked neatly, no temperature-controlled rooms. There is only the straw, the thin wool, the chill that sinks slowly into the bones, and the constant companionship of the pests and the smells. Yet sleep, once accepted, is deep and unbroken, because the human body is remarkably adaptable. In darkness and stillness, the mind drifts, untethered from the constant worries of work, hunger, and fear. Perhaps dreams carry fleeting images of green fields, of rivers sparkling in imagined sunlight, or of distant towns beyond one's knowledge, brief escapes from the immediacy of medieval life. It is into this quiet reflection that we return to Sophie, soon to become Catherine the Great. After the ritual of her conversion in St. Petersburg, she began life in a new land governed by unfamiliar rules, steep hierarchies, and cautious courtiers. Every day presented subtle challenges, lessons in diplomacy, observation, and strategy. Her youth was spent mastering languages, memorizing rituals, and understanding the intricate balance of loyalty, fear, and influence. These tasks were not urgent in the sense of immediate survival, like fending off hunger or disease in the medieval village, but they were essential to a different kind of life, one in which every action could affect her safety, reputation, and ultimately, her future. Catherine's early days in Russia were slow, measured, and deliberate. She moved quietly through the palace halls, noting the smallest gestures of her companions and the slight shifts in mood among the court. She studied the maps of the empire, the histories of rulers long past, and the politics of neighboring nations. Patience was a tool as necessary as intelligence, observation, a weapon more potent than any sword. The cold marble floors of the palace, the echo of distant voices, the soft rustle of heavy fabrics, all became part of her daily life, each sound and movement a subtle note in the grand symphony of power that she would one day conduct. Her transformation from Sophie to Catherine was not instantaneous, it was gradual, a slow shaping of character, intellect, and resolve, much like the careful tending of a garden in a harsh climate, each seed placed with intention, each weed removed with foresight. While Catherine's challenges were political and social, rather than physical and immediate, the mental and emotional demands were exacting. She navigated a world in which trust was scarce, and appearances were essential. Friends and servants were observed, letters read, intentions questioned. Every day required vigilance, patience, and a careful weighing of possibilities. The rhythm of palace life, measured by court ceremonies, meals, and public appearances, was as structured and relentless as the tolling of the church bells in a medieval village. Yet Catherine adapted, absorbing the routines, understanding the hierarchy, and beginning to find subtle ways to assert influence. The slow accumulation of knowledge, experience, and alliances became the foundation upon which she would build her remarkable ascent. At night, Catherine too rested, though never fully at ease. The chambers of St. Petersburg were draughty, and the fur-lined garments, though warm, could not replace the ever-present awareness that danger and opportunity existed in equal measure. Sleep was a tool, brief and necessary, a time when the mind could process the complexities of the day and prepare for the challenges of the next. Even as she drifted into dreams, they were not escapes but quiet rehearsals, a mental mapping of court intrigues, alliances, and the subtle art of negotiation. The life she led demanded patience, observation, and endurance, echoing, in a quieter, more refined way, the slow rhythms of the medieval peasants who labored simply to exist. And so we can draw a parallel between these worlds. The medieval peasant and the future empress both experience life as a sequence of slow, measured steps. One navigates physical survival, the other navigates social survival. One endures hunger, lice, and disease. The other endures scrutiny, political maneuvering, and the subtle pressures of power. Both, however, must persist, day by day, with patience, awareness, and careful attention to the rhythms of the world around them. Both must adapt, anticipate, and endure, though the forms of hardship differ, and in both, the human capacity for resilience quietly asserts itself. As you settle into your own bed tonight with warmth, quiet, and safety, it is worth imagining these past lives and noticing the slow, enduring patterns of human existence. Imagine the village in the moonlight, the peasants breathing evenly in their straw beds, the fires reduced to soft glows, the faint murmur of animals settling for the night. Imagine Catherine, in the cold Russian palace, tracing the curves of a map, reading the inscriptions in a language foreign to her childhood, resting her head on her pillow with quiet determination. Both worlds, though distant and vastly different, share the same human rhythm: endurance, reflection, preparation, and the gentle acceptance of each moment as it comes. In this calm reflection, one begins to see life as a series of small, measured acts. Survival is not always about heroism. Often, it is about patience, observation, and adaptation. Food is eaten slowly, work is completed in repetition, and every small decision is a thread in a larger tapestry that sustains existence. Even when the world is harsh, as in the medieval village, or demanding, as in the imperial court, life continues. Breath follows breath, step follows step, and the mind finds quiet spaces amidst the routine and the ordinary. Perhaps, too, there is a lesson in this quiet endurance. Life does not always require dramatic gestures, epic battles, or heroic feats. Sometimes it requires only attention, patience, and persistence. The medieval peasant endures the elements, labor, and hunger. The young Sophie endures the scrutiny, cold, and isolation of a foreign court. Each finds strength in their small, deliberate actions. Each moves slowly, carefully, and steadily, crafting a life through the accumulation of measured steps. It is in these quiet, often overlooked moments that survival and growth are realized. So, as your eyes grow heavy, consider the rhythm of these lives, the gentle cadence of work and rest, of observation and learning, of hunger and satisfaction, of fear and resilience. Feel the slow pulse of history, the quiet patience of humans enduring challenges beyond imagination. Allow yourself to drift with this rhythm, as the villagers drift into sleep in straw beds, as Catherine drifts into dreams beneath fur-lined blankets. The world, in its slow unfolding, is vast and sometimes indifferent, yet it carries within it the continuity of life, endurance, and quiet persistence. Let the warmth of your bed, the steady hum of the world outside your window, and the knowledge of centuries of human persistence lull you into calm rest. The medieval peasant sleeps, the young Sophie rests, and you, in your own time and place, follow the same human pattern, breathing slowly, sinking into comfort, and carrying forward the quiet resilience of those who came before. Tonight, the world is calm, the past is remembered, and you are allowed, in your peace and safety, to close your eyes, breathe deeply, and rest, knowing that life continues, quietly, steadily, and with gentle rhythm.